Mark, when we say bullish, how bullish are you?
I'm optimistic, Kelly. I think if we use GDP as our benchmark, the value of all the things that we produce, I expect it to grow about 4% for the calendar year 2022. That'll allow for a lot more jobs. And I think by the end of 2022, a year from now, unemployment will be in the mid threes. So very close to what I think most people will consider to be full employment. So, there'll be ups and downs in all rounds. And obviously, the pandemic is going to create a bit of havoc here early in the year. But I think when you look through the entirety of the year, it should end up being pretty good.
Can we talk about Omicron for a moment? I mean, the economic impact is large because a lot of people, myself included, still had to do a 10-day quarantine when we got it. And it's destroying a lot of industries who are having to basically hit the brakes, even though it might be less dangerous than what we had last year. I now see the CDC is maybe saying the quarantine period can come down to 5 days. What's the economic impact of Omicron so far?
Well, it's doing damage. I mean, I think the good case study here for what's going to happen is the Delta wave, which hit back in the fall. And if you look at Q3 GDP growth, prior to Delta, I was expecting something close to 5-6% growth. So it's a very strong quarter. We got 2. So we still grew, but very modestly. I expect something similar here. Before Omicron really came on the scene a few weeks ago, I was expecting 5-6% growth for Q1 2022. So now I expect something closer to 2. So I think that's the guidepost. I mean, obviously, there's differences between Omicron and Delta, but I think that's a pretty good benchmark. And if that's the case, then we'll get a bounce back, once the wave passes, and it will pass. The other thing I'll say is, it depends on what statistic you're looking at. I mean, I think GDP output, that'll get hit harder than jobs. I mean, I think businesses, you can see that in today's initial claims from employment insurance. They're not going to lay off workers if they can really help it because, they know that this wave is going to pass. And on the other side of it, their biggest problem is going to be labor supply, getting people to work. And so they're not going to lay off workers. So the job market should hold in better than output.
One follow-up to GDP, even that 2% number in the third quarter, if you add in nominal, if you add in inflation, we really saw growth in the 8 to 9% range, which is humongous. And that, it's there, and it does have a policy impact, maybe has an impact for what the Fed's going to decide to do here. So is that adding to the confusion right now where they might need to tighten because we have high nominal GDP, even though real GDP isn't that great?
Yeah, good point. So, another key question here is, will Omicron juice up inflation like Delta did? I mean, Delta nailed growth, but it also juiced up inflation, disrupted supply chains, and people got sick, couldn't go to work, and therefore wages got jacked up for, those industries where a lot of those people couldn't work. So will that happen here? I'm hopeful that, we won't see the same kind of inflationary effects that, the CDC's decision to reduce the self-isolation to 5 days, for example, is a sign that we're adjusting to the pandemic. And I think supply chains, obviously there'll be some disruption, but I'm hopeful that businesses have identified the bottlenecks and can work around them better. So I don't think inflation is going to pick up here to the same degree that it did, back when Delta hit. The other big difference is on the inflation front is energy prices. I mean, they were going north, back during Delta, which added a lot to inflation. They're headed south here, in Omicron, and that should help. So I don't think we're going to get the same kind of inflationary effects. But, if we do, then, yeah, the Fed's got a real tough decision to make around.
Although maybe we could say,
what do I do about growth or inflation?
Sure. And thinking about inflation, at least it will add to upside pressure that might otherwise be going away. What's your inflation forecast for 2022? And why did people get this year so wrong? Because it's funny to look back on comments from Yellen and some others where she said, we could see 3% inflation this year, but no one was saying, 6%, 7%.
Well, I should be pretty sheepish here. I got it pretty wrong, too. I missed it. I think this inflation surges that we got was Delta. It was just, we didn't predict Delta. I mean, think about, you got the vaccines beginning this time last year. We thought we were on the other side of the pandemic, and we weren't. And Delta really did a number, particularly very idiosyncratic. It really creamed Asia, particularly Southeast Asia, where a lot of these supply chains begin. And businesses got taken by surprise. I think they were just shocked by what happened. So in my mind, the inflation we observed that really came to the fore, made it top of mind, was Delta, and that was the big surprise. Now, you buy into that diagnosis, I think Omicron will do some damage with regard to inflation, but I am expecting the pandemic to continue to recede here, do less damage to the economy going forward, inflationary effects less pronounced. And on top of that, some of these prices are going to come crashing down. I mean, vehicle prices, which they've gone parabolic, they're going to come back in. And once they come back in, that's going to be a real deflationary force. So to answer your question, I think inflation is going to be pretty close to the Fed's target by this time next year.